Hello and warm good evening. I'm Aditya Tikku, the convener for GCTC. A warm welcome to all the esteemed members of GCTC, the distinguished speakers, the honorable moderator. I from GCTC headquarters like to welcome you all, sir. And first of all, I would like to introduce the speakers of today and the topic. The topic that we are actually discussing out is about the relevance of BRI post-COVID. Well, the topic is very dear to me, so today I would like to introduce everyone to our moderator. We have with us Ambassador Gautam Bambawale. He is the session chair for today. Ambassador Bambawale is a former High Commissioner to Pakistan and ex-ambassador to Bhutan. Ambassador Bambawale is the second Indian Foreign Service officer to join the private sector of the Jaishankar. Mr. Bambawale was an Indian ambassador to China and has now joined one of the premium largest right as a senior advisor for the corporate and the international affairs. He has also previously served as the Indian High Commissioner to Pakistan. Mr. Gautam served in the Indian High Commissions at the Hong Kong and Beijing from 1985 to 1991. Upon his return to the Ministry of External Affairs, he served as the first desk officer for China in the ministry. From 1993 to 1994, Bambawale was the director in the Americas division of the ministry. In addition to this, in his tenure, he has also served as the head of the political wing at the Indian Embassy in the Washington, D.C., and Indian ambassador to Bhutan from August 2014 to December 2015. Warm welcome, sir. I will start with our first speaker, that is Professor Swaran Singh. Dr. Swaran Singh is a professor and chairman of CPOT, School of International Relations, Jawaharlal Nehru University, which is one of the premium institutions across Asia. In addition to this, he is also the president for Association of Asia Scholars, New Delhi, General Secretary for Indian Congress of Asian and Pacific Studies, Varanasi, and Adjunct Senior Fellow, China, India, the Cherhar Institute, Beijing, to name a few. He is a professor of diplomacy and disarmament, and 32 PhDs and over 50 MPhil have been already awarded under his supervision. Warm welcome, sir. We have with us General Daya Ratnaike. General Daya Ratnaike, who assumed office on 20th December 2019, is the 26th chairman of the Sri Lanka Port Authority. He was formerly the commander of Sri Lanka Army. He has commanded divisions and brigades during the separatist war in Sri Lanka. General Daya Ratnaike is the only military officer in the armed forces of Sri Lanka who has been awarded with the gallantry medals for the most number of times. Warm welcome, sir.
Thank you.
We have with us General Kamaljeet Singh. Well, General Kamaljeet Singh is the Executive Council member for GCTC. He is the former Western Army commander, commanded corps in the Sikhism and served in the UN Angola. During his 3-decade-long career, he has served in the several counter-insurgency areas such as Nagaland, Manipur, and Punjab. Was twice commended by Eastern Army Commander during his service in the Nagaland and Manipur. In addition to this, he is also a regular columnist and holds the Maharaj Ranjit Singh Chair at Punjab University. Welcome, sir, again. We have with us Captain Alok Bansal. Captain Alok Bansal is the Director for India Foundation, one of the premium think tanks in India and abroad. He is also the adjunct professor at the New Delhi Institute of Management and the Secretary General for Asian Eurasian Human Rights Forum. He was the founder executive director of the South Asian Institute for Strategic Affairs, SAISA, and a visiting professor at the Pakistan Studies program at the Jamia Millia Islamia. Warm welcome, sir. We also have with us Dr. Praveer Dey. Praveer Dey is a professor at the Research and Information System, for Developing Countries, RIS. He is also the head of the ASEAN India Center at RIS. He works in the field of international economy and has research interests in international trade and development. He has been conducting policy research for the Government of India and several national and international organizations. He has contributed several research papers in the international journals and written books on trade and development. His recent book includes Act East to Act Indo-Pacific, India's expanding neighborhood. He is also the founding editor of the Journal of Asian Economic Integration, published by SAGE. We have with us our fellow friend Nasir Shirazi. Nasir Shirazi is the president of one of the leading think tanks in Pakistan, Center for Pakistan and Gulf Studies, Pakistan, a platform established to undertake studies, policy research, advocacy, and consultancy. He is an LLB and LLM who is now an advocate at the High Court and Supreme Court of Pakistan. Additionally, he has done his MSc and MPhil in international relations with his area of specialization being Middle East politics, Pakistan-China relations, strategic studies, law, and human rights. We have with us Senior Kusina. He's the program manager, head of program for South Asia and Asia Pacific at the Russian International Affairs Council. She is from Moscow State Institute of International Relations under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia. With an MA in International Law, Kusina has authored and edited several RIS reports and working papers related to the Russia's ties with the Asia Pacific and South Asian states, notably with India, China, Japan, and South Korea. As part of her duties at RIAC, she organized numerous major programs. Last but not the least, we have Lucio Pitlo. Lucio Pitlo III is a research fellow at the Asia Pacific Pathways to Progress Foundation and contributing editor for the Asian Politics and the Policy Journal. He was the lecturer on the international studies at the De La Salle University and on the Chinese studies at the Ateneo de Manila University. He also obtained his BA Public Administration from the University of the Philippines and his Masters of Law from Peking University, and is presently pursuing his MA International Affairs at the American University in Washington. We thank you all for honoring this webinar with your presence, and we think that you will certainly do a great amount of justice to this. And now I would request Ambassador Bambavle to kindly go through it. Ambassador Bambavle, over to you.
Thank you very much. And let me also add my words of welcome to all our speakers, as well as to all the audience who are participating in today's GCTC Manthan or GCTC seminar or discussion on the relevance of the Belt and Road Initiative, particularly in a post-COVID world. As some of you would know, GCTC, or the Global Counterterrorism Council, which is headquartered in New Delhi, India, is an international think tank which brings together the best minds in national security and geopolitics with the aim of promoting global peace. Some of you may ask the question, why is a global think tank or an Indian think tank on counterterrorism discussing an obvious geo-economic subject like the Belt and Road Initiative? I think the answer is quite straightforward, because in its ideation, the Belt and Road Initiative is such a huge concept that it also has implications for security of many of the nations who are involved in this Belt and Road Initiative, as well as those nations and countries through which the Belt and Road Initiative passes. let me start by trying to lay the grounds and the framework for today's discussion, and then I will very quickly turn to our speakers, a very distinguished lot of speakers from across the globe. But let me try to lay a sort of platform on which all of you can build. As all of you know, the Belt and Road Initiative, or as it was earlier referred to as the One Belt, One Road project, is a series of infrastructure projects including roads, highways, railways, ports, which were aimed to connect China through Asia to Europe and Africa. Why has it been called the Belt and Road Initiative? Because towards the end of 2013, the then and current president of the People's Republic of China and the General Secretary of the Communist Party of China, Mr. Xi Jinping, made two very important speeches, one in Kazakhstan and the other in Indonesia. In Kazakhstan, he spoke about a land route which would link China through the rest of Asia, especially Central Asia and beyond, to Europe and Africa. And he called this land route, which retraced the ancient Silk Route, he called it the Silk Road Economic Belt. Later that year of 2013, President Xi Jinping made a second important speech in Indonesia, where he spoke of a maritime route which would link China with Europe. And he named this the 21st Century Maritime Silk Road. So this is where you got the words road and belt, and therefore it came to be known as One Belt, One Road, or now the Belt and Road Initiative. I must add, and many of you who speak Chinese know this as a fact, that in the Chinese language, this project, this very ambitious project of infrastructure development in Asia, Africa, and Europe, was always referred to as Itai Ilu, or One Belt, One Road. The outlay on the Belt and Road Initiative varies in various forms of the initiative, and it varies between $1 trillion, which is a huge amount by itself, to almost $8 trillion. But so far, the evidence is that the actual amount of money invested by China in the Belt and Road Initiative is roughly about 80 to 90 billion US dollars. But there is no doubt that the Belt and Road Initiative is a very grandiose scheme or idea, and therefore many thinkers, many analysts, many writers, authors, students of China have asked the question whether the Belt and Road Initiative is an integral part of China's grand strategy, particularly for the 21st century and the early decades of the 21st century. And this is a question which I would like our speakers, very eminent speakers, to also attempt to answer. One other issue which has arisen even before the current coronavirus or COVID-19 virus spread across the globe was the viability of some of these stellar projects of the Belt and Road Initiative. And in fact, some smaller countries faced huge problems about the debt increase, and some of them felt that they were falling into a debt trap as a result of the loans undertaken to build infrastructure as part of the BRI. India, of course, keeps a very close watch on what is called as a very integral and important part of the BRI, which is the CPEC, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which we believe passes through what is Indian territory or territory claimed by India. And therefore, India has a great objection to the BRI and India did not participate in the two Belt and Road forums which were held in Beijing over the last several years. But the question which we need to focus on, ladies and gentlemen, today is how will the BRI be impacted by the coronavirus and how will it do in a post-COVID world? Will it continue as it was planned earlier? Will it not be impacted at all by this current crisis and the lockdowns that have been effected in many, many countries across the globe? Will it come to a complete standstill? Will it be somewhere in between these two extremes? How will the Belt and Road Initiative progress in an era of social distancing? And there are many other questions which all of you would probably be in your remarks. So, having set the stage for our discussion, I would now like to turn to our first speaker, and I call upon Professor Swaran Singh of the Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi, who has worked on China, on India-China relations and questions for many, many years. He has many books and articles to his credit. Let me turn to him first, and let me also add the caveat that we would like in these initial remarks to not exceed 7 minutes so that we have enough time for a discussion and a debate after that. So with those initial remarks, let me now turn to Professor Swaran Singh of JNU in New Delhi. Professor Singh.
Sir, your mic is mute. Please unmute it. So kindly unmute your mic.
Okay.
Right.
Is it okay now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Bambawale. I'm happy to be joining the session chaired by you. Among others, you were there at a crucial period when the first 5 years of President Xi Jinping got completed, and he laid foundations of his more ambitious second 5 years. And now we talk of his, staying there for a longer period of time. I'm also delighted, and I compliment Aditya for organizing such an impressive panel. And I will try to, of course, keep to my limit of 7 minutes. I was told 5 to 7 minutes. So let me say in my 7 minutes, I'll try to make 5 points. The first point that I wish to underline is that there is enormous fluidity when we talk about post-COVID. Not only what kind of world we'll land into, but what would be that time span which will define that we have finally moved into post-COVID situation. A quick example could be the Cold War. We took 15 years to understand we were in Cold War and took another 15 years to understand we were out of it. So a lot of discourses will depend on how we visualize what is post-COVID and what is the time span that we give it to. In my 10 seconds, I believe it will be repeatedly showing ups and downs. There is not going to be a linear deceleration and acceleration of health sector and economic growth, but we'll see several hiccups, and then nations will be confused that we have perhaps moved into post-COVID situation or not. A very quickly related point, if we have to be very optimistic, then the only country that can be seen as having moved into post-COVID situation is none other than China itself. So if anyone can claim to have moved into post-COVID situation, and I'm saying very ambitious assessment it is China, of course. Now, how do we look at China in that post-COVID, if we believe that China is in post-COVID, is my second point. The most visible part of that post-COVID China is enormous criticism that we are noticing of China, particularly among the developed world, but of course also in large number of African nations. And that criticism is in some sense accelerated which is in a continuation, but it's accelerated in that sense, that partly underlines the politics of it, where you have certain concerns in developed countries of making space to rising, expanding China. And that partly explains, other than the fact that they really may have serious concerns, and we are debating whether the virus was leaked from the one institute of virology or it is, sort of an outcome of a natural mutation of viruses. A lot of debates are going on. So China definitely has come under a certain scanner globally. Closely related is the hit that it has on its rising economic strength. Again, in continuation of deceleration of Chinese growth rates, which we watched for last 5-6 years, now it seems that it is going to receive a major hit on economic growth rate, which has been the panacea or even intoxicant for keeping the party in power and keeping the social harmony intact in China. To again give a very quick example of this, last year, I saw estimates that in last 5 years, the unemployment numbers in urban China had reached about 5 million people. And now they are saying that within this year, the number could go up to 9 million people. Chinese as a system are not used to high rates of unemployment. So they'll have to deal with this kind of a challenge that they face. Equally, if you remember the October 2019 famous speech of Xi Jinping defining his vision for future, how he will take China out of that, mid-income trap and move beyond that into a developed nation. Now that vision, that dream will also have to be redefined in terms of time and space. Now, I was noticing, among others, an article published recently by Kevin Rudd. He's kind of similar to Henry Kissinger among politicians at international level, knowing China very well, and he defines that Maslow's hierarchy of priorities for Xi Jinping would now be definitely keeping the party in power, keeping the nation united, and expanding the economy. So BRI comes under third priority for Xi Jinping, according to this article in that sense. So BRI then does not become the top priority for Xi Jinping as of now, though it was seen as a brainchild of Xi Jinping. And that leads to me to the third point I'm going to make now in my 5-7 minutes, which is to say that there is a debate which is believing that maybe BRI is going to die. Is BRI dead because of whole bankruptcy, whole kind of economy being in tatters, the whole debt issue of recipient countries. Is BRI going to die here? Very quickly, I think that's a bit of an exaggeration to believe. And why I say so, because for me, BRI was never part of China's ambition. BRI for me was always an outcome of China's compulsion of having excess of manpower, which is skilled manpower, excess of foreign exchange reserves, which is money, and excess of materials churning out of factories. So it had to find space to invest those three very, very important components of economic power. And that led to BRI. So it was already facing enormous compulsion-driven kind of projects that it was doing abroad. And we have heard about debt traps and other things which added to that debate on compulsions of China. So if you look at now BRI as an outcome of China's compulsions, there are then, which is my fourth point, short-term and long-term outcomes of COVID-19 for BRI. Short-term outcomes are very simple. About 130 countries have placed travel restrictions for Chinese. 130 countries have decided that they should not allow Chinese people to travel to those countries because of fear of infection. But an equal number of countries are constantly also receiving Chinese medical supplies at the same time. And that is also partly true of all the major developed nations which are criticizing China, but on other hand also receiving China's material help. And before others give their examples, to look at India, we are trying to sign contracts with about half a dozen countries, from Canada to Japan to Germany to France and everybody else, South Korea. The only country which has supplied us in such a short time span is China. We, of course, also have issues with Chinese supplies. And then, of course, there is a dichotomy here of who can deliver and who can deliver at a short notice. China is known to be the factory of the world in that sense. So in short run, these contestations, of course, will continue. In the long run, I believe COVID-19, just like it is going to redefine several other parts of our lives, it is expected to redefine global world order. It will also redefine BRI. Again, pushing certain trends which were already going on. I think it would make, as Ambassador in the opening remarks said, it started an extremely unilateral thinking aloud process and became a kind of a much bigger project. It will continue in that direction and become far more multilateral. All BRI projects with about 70 plus countries now are simply bilateral agreements, which are fundamentally meant to extend Chinese skilled manpower, Chinese financial resource, technical resource to those countries. Now I think it will have to increasingly become far more multilateral. And when it becomes far more multilateral, it will also perhaps gradually propitiate the kind of concern that world has had about transparency being an issue of how these contracts are signed and created. I mean, we have a great example of Pakistan's National Assembly not knowing how Pakistan has been signing the biggest project called CPEC, and details of that are not known even to the members of National Assembly. And I think some kind of transparency, and closely related to transparency is that other countries' companies would also get contracts. Not only Chinese companies will get contracts in undertaking these projects. So in that sense, I think a bit of accommodation of what have been the concerns of emerging economies, mid-ranking powers may not necessarily be the great powers. And that brings me to the final point of great powers. The impact of BRI will also be measured in competition with what others are doing. For example, United States, Japan, Australia, India have also been doing several parallel connectivity projects. They're often seen as if in competition to BRI. If we notice this, apparently the economic hit on major powers, if we believe the International Monetary Fund assessment recently, is going to be much bigger than the hit on China. And that is not just because China came out of the COVID-19 first. Only two countries are believed, according to IMF, to get positive growth rates, India and China. And that is primarily because they are on the rising trajectory as of now. They have a relatively young population, growing middle class, new consumers, etc., etc. So China will focus increasingly, I believe now, on internal consumption, which has become a driver of its growth lately, because its international trade, despite greater demand for health and medical materials, that international trade is going to get hit, and therefore that is where China's growth rate will shrink. So internal growth rate will be internal consumption-led growth rate here. India is also trying to some extent to do that. The big competitors, European Union, we notice is already in a disarray, not only because of their anti-immigration, because of their Brexit and falling apart situation, but also because they are the big 5 countries of EU have had 1 million plus infected people. So you can understand EU is both the political and economic and social stress. United States is less said the better. We know what is happening in the United States. Nobody knows actually. He's fundamentally deviating attention by focusing on immigration, criticizing WHO, criticizing China. So apparently the competitors of China, I think, are also under a bigger stress than China is. So BRI to me will continue to be an important project redefining the connectivity of the global interface. It will have to redefine itself, but it is not going to be undermined or disappear simply because some great powers are not happy with China or don't like the way BRI is conceived. So we may not love China, but I think China is there. It is the largest economy on the planet in PPP terms, and that cannot be ignored. And I think despite the shrink, despite the disjunction, despite all the stress that China will be now, BRI will survive, and I think it will be an opportunity, and I think COVID-19 is going to force BRI to redefine itself. Thank you very much. I will close here, and I hope I was able to keep it in time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Professor Swaran Singh. Thank you for your initial remarks. Let me now turn to General Daya Ratnaike of Sri Lanka. As we have just heard, he has had an illustrious career in the Sri Lankan Army, including being commanding officer of the Sri Lankan Military Academy, also military spokesman for the Ministry of Defense of Sri Lanka. And after his retirement, of course, he holds a very key post and position of the chairman of the Sri Lankan Port Authority. General, could I turn to you and also request you that in your opening remarks, if you could answer and focus on some of the questions regarding viability, because there were some projects in Sri Lanka under the Belt and Road Initiative where viability was a big issue. General, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Thank you.
Right. I'll start with the script that I started, and I will answer during the question and answer. The Chinese BRI project, Sri Lanka is also in the focus. You all know there is a few investments coming here. Colombo port city is one of them. The Hambantota port. These are things that are in the discussions. So during the discussions, we can take these things on. So if I may start with the script that I had just prepared. The post-COVID-19 world will be the dramatic economic, social, and security change, particularly in the spheres of national thinking. Such thinking will be the foundation. Such thinking will be the foundation to shape the new world order after COVID-19. However, we cannot be very precise on how the new order will be looked like for the reasons that COVID-19 is still spreading in varying proportions in the world. Spreading badly in many countries, particularly in Europe and in the USA. We have no calculations yet on how it will spread on South Asia and Africa, but clear warnings of severe consequences if not curtailed properly. We can assume devastating economic collapses, social and political turmoil, and decrease of connectivity in the worst case scenario. This tendency will definitely influence China's Belt and Road Initiative as well, both negatively and in some areas positively. This pandemic has taught each nation, including Sri Lanka, the weakness of global interconnectedness. May it be with the West or the East, the pandemic has taught Sri Lanka the importance of self-reliance. I am sure that many other South Asian countries will be in the same thinking, and it is not going well with the BRI. Due to COVID-19, Chinese economy has also hit hard, and as a result, we can speculate a shortfall in funding of BRI in the short run. We should not forget that growth rate of China was decreasing even before the COVID-19 outbreak. As the US and the Europe markets are also badly affected due to COVID-19, Chinese exports will also have a bad hit. Perhaps there will be some BRI project failures. Despite the world witness that the COVID-19 originated from Wuhan in China and spreading all over the world, China has been able to successfully contain the pandemic within China. Not only that, China now is helping other countries also to fight COVID-19, emerging as a global leader. This will be a force multiplier for China to keep its BRI countries together in the agenda. Therefore, we have no sufficient evidence to say that BRI project will continue to be affected in the long run. For sure, it will pick up again gradually with economic stability of those BRI countries in the long run. The other point is that we cannot deny the fact that China has been successful in making significant inroads to Asia and Africa. China is fast becoming the largest trading partner in Africa and in many Asian countries today. So it is like colonialism is coming again to those weak countries in Asia and Africa, but this time with the Chinese essence. China's power is spilling over beyond its own territory and significantly through trade and investment. In this context, India is also growing and see her own traditional hegemony is being challenged by the Chinese, particularly in South Asian region and in the Indian Ocean. China is expanding its power, and in such a context, it appears that the two countries will lead to rivalry over the supremacy. However, my view is that this tendency is potentially destabilizing to both countries for several reasons. Both countries are nuclear powers. India fears of strategic encirclement by China being in the Indian Ocean will provide US to play a more role in the Indian Ocean than what is necessary. So the future scenario in the Indian Ocean region will not take the shape of regional but global involving three powers, namely US, China, and India, projecting their trade and military powers. If there is no cooperative strategy, the two powers, namely India and China, will continue to struggle for regional supremacy and for the international supremacy as well as rivals. Such a tendency will only lead to a Cold War scenario. Now the global power is shifting from west to east. In such a scenario, let's see whether Quad could act as a deterrent against China. China is expecting its expansion through BRI. For Chinese expansion, the US has Quad for US-led expansion. However, like BRI, the Quad is aimed at security cooperation of 4 democracies. Quad is all about a grouping of big democracies, and so it will strengthen the security of small democracies like Sri Lanka as well in the region. However, it does not mean that Quad is a real deterrence against Chinese multi-layered expansion. Quad is openly not an anti-China coalition either, but in hindsight, the Quad aims at making policy-level approaches to strengthen shared values and interests of maritime democracies, and in that there is no expansion of a containment strategy, particularly towards China. Success of the Quad by the US as a deterrent against China will depend on deepening relations by the US with other Quad countries, not in terms of defense alone, but in other areas as well. Finally, the global powers have, if we think of China as the #1 power in the world, the global powers have not risen peacefully, and this is what the world history has shown us. However, if I mean China's hegemony as an international leadership role, particularly in the global political economy, I cannot purely say that it will be either a peaceful hegemonic rise or a violent one. It is difficult to predict or define for a number of reasons. Chinese military power is still weak to aggressively show its against the US and its allies. Further, China will be less competitive in the political military alliance against the US. Therefore, a pure violent hegemonic rise by China is a miscalculation. On the other hand, China does not challenge the prevailing global order in terms of political value, ideologies, and the type of the government. China promotes trade with liberal democracies like US and with total dictatorship like Cuba. China focuses on sovereignty and not on the regime types. Therefore, there is no much barriers for China to have a peaceful rise as well. Therefore, it is very difficult to predict for now. So, ladies and gentlemen, I will stop here, and during the discussions, we can take on any questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, General. Let me now turn to Lieutenant General Kamaljeet Singh, KJ Singh, who, of course, had a very illustrious career in the Indian Army. He was also our Western Army commander before his retirement. And since his retirement recently, he has been the State Information Commissioner in the Indian state of Haryana in North India. Lieutenant General Singh, if I could give you the floor and ask you to make your initial comments, and again request everyone not to exceed the time limit of about 7 minutes each. Thank you. General Singh. General Singh, are you online with us? Aditya, is General Singh with us, or has he? Okay, in that case, we'll come back to him later. Could I now turn to Dr. Prabir Dey, who's done a lot of work in this. General Singh, are you with us?
Can you hear me, please?
Yes, we can hear you now. We can hear you.
While I agree with the initial remarks made by Professor Swaran Singh, that indeed there will be slowing down and recalibration in BRI projects, yet I have to take the lead from the remarks made by Ambassador Gautam Bambawale, where he said that BRI is indeed a very grandiose kind of a project. I would qualify it by saying that it is audacious project as far as CPEC is concerned. And that is what concerns us the most. In my perception, CPEC is a project for China, by China, and Pakistan just happened to be there. They wanted to get to the Gwadar. They wanted a warm water port connectivity, and they wanted to resolve the Malacca dilemma. So they got to Gwadar, and Pakistan happened to be there, and it is even worse luck for India that POK also happened to be there. So we couldn't join it. Although BRI may get recalibrated, but there is a lot of prestige attached to CPEC. And if there is anything which will start and get back on the rails the fastest, it will be CPEC project. It is a flagship project. It has already been on for about a decade plus. Certain projects have been repackaged, transportation, rail, metro, power projects, and Pakistan is already reaping early harvest, or early harvest projects are hopes in Pakistan's power situation are getting replaced by some of the coal-fired projects, thermal projects coming online. So I have a feeling, and with 7,000 to 8,000 Chinese, which are already deployed in Pakistan, currently they may, or something which can get kick-started quickly, and that is the need of the hour even for to demonstrate to the world. Then it would be for sure CPEC. And Pakistan is also put together a huge security force for them. There are some reports that there is one division, some reports that there is more than one division. There are men employed. There is FWO of Pakistan, which is more like the roads. The interest this project slowed down time for China was doing. They have not, we have Pakistan is big area in it or next to Guwahati. There projects which are there are all that one or balloon is not most like it will certainly calibrate. They shouldn't be sprouting. China's area which balloon, even the sim of like diamond, if going to be ecology and problems, then these projects in. So these projects will have to be rebuilt. Certain appreciation, while it seems slow to start the CPEC, and while others may have reservations and I must flag the remarks of Lieutenant General Amir Riyaz, who he told his officers that Chinese needs next time, then they hope that Pakistan they have the kind of project.
I'm afraid, General Singh, we are not being able to hear you clearly at all. If I could request you to just check your sound, and we'll come back to you again a little later. In the meantime, if I could just pass on to Dr. Prabir Dey, Dr. Day, are you with us? Can you hear me? Professor Dr. Prabir Day is professor at the Research and Information System for Developing Countries in Delhi. And Professor Day has spent a lot of energy, time in studying infrastructure development in Asia. He has followed the BRI very closely. So let me request Dr. Prabir Day to first give his comments. And General Singh, we'll come back to you in a little while. If you can just correct and rectify the sound problems that we're having with you. Dr. Prabir Day, please.
Sir, kindly unmute your mic, please.
Prabir, can you hear us? Are you online?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead,
Right.
Prabir, please.
Right. Sir, thank you very much for the invitation, and in particular, I'm grateful to Ambassador Bambawale for invitation and continuous support and inspiration to do good work. And so, 5 minutes, sir. Many things I can't say, but if I go with a few bullet points for the sake of opening the discussion in so many audience are here. One is, if you see the before COVID, China's global trade was almost about and global exports was 2.5 trillion. Total exports out of 2.5 trillion to US was about something around $500 billion. So if you leave out US bilateral trade with China, all the BRI countries are part of China's project. So some odd 80 plus, they were actually picking up China's global export, something around 50%. Now, what China used to do, we know it very well. It is through the corridors, through the connectivity. China initially in the first 5 years used to, exports more about their excess steel, excess cement, high-speed railway engine, etc., etc. Then trade follows, connectivity follows, and several other things happen. Now, this was happening very nicely in India's neighborhood. We have seen and we know it very well. Now there are risks associated, and there are eminent speakers here who know very well than me about the strategic challenges, India's strategic challenges. I'm not going there. From the economics point of view, what I have seen, that if you leave aside the China-Pakistan economic corridor, which is disputed, the rest part of Chinese project to an economist is simply about a development cooperation lead, trade lead, connectivity lead, normal thing. One country can be, for that, may not be happy, because if gap between Chinese trade and the other partner, if not narrowing down. That happened with an India and China case. Our exports are not growing with China. We're unable to get a market access, so there are frustrations, I understand. But if you come to the other side, something like India, China, BCIM economic corridor, that's the project we always wanted to have it, but somehow it didn't pick up, and we know why it hasn't picked up, in the ground. We did some studies and all. We can have an exclusive discussion if opportunity arises in today's webinar. Now, post-COVID, what I'm going to see, and then I will conclude. In the post-COVID,
Belt and Road Initiative.
In the post-COVID, the trade rules, regulation, norms, procedure, and processes globally, they are going to change. Why? Countries will insist that please send us COVID-free goods. Countries will insist products and services which don't cause health hazard. So health, human security, followed by food security, job, employment, those things will take care of the priorities in the next 2 to 5 years' time. And there are new templates that are coming up already there. I'm in touch with the carriers, those who are sending exports and imports between countries. New things are already being discussed. So with that, either the two options to China. They need to adjust to the new scenario that is unfolding, or they just give up the original, their plan through the Belt and Road Initiative. But I think I go by with Professor Saran Singh that giving up means a huge loss, huge non-performing assets, because everything they got in the air, they cannot do it. So what China will be doing, and here I think there is some hope that where I think that there could be some cooperation and collaboration. I think I go for some kind of collaboration, at least when this is going to pay to India or South Asian countries. First, we need to sit down again in the post-COVID time, what China and India can do in the health sector, in the sectors like where we need special interests. We need Chinese, many products. They're not the bad, actually. We need those PPEs, for example, the testing kits. Can our laboratories and their laboratories, for the sake of the health, can they do something better? I leave aside something which, the strategic aspect, some other, security areas. Second is, with the new trade rules regulations, China and India part of G20, these issues will come up. Yes, they will be, debated heavily in the next 1 year or 2 years. In the G20 forum, this will be debated heavily without China and India in G7. This will be there in other in WTO. This will be there in EAS and at the bilateral level, and also many places. So at the moment, all the value chains centering China is disrupted. These value chains are good or bad. At this time, we are not discussing. But once we come back, and if the multinationals and the small and medium-sized entrepreneurs, if they move out from China to somewhere in this world, and new value chains, new supply chains for the automobile, textile, leather, many other products that we see that those who are labor intensive, then, and if India joins, then India benefits, because labor intensive value chain will give lots of support to create new jobs. So here I think that India-China cooperation, kind of creating new value chains, new supply chains, this is an opportunity. But when you talk about purely in a competition point of view, in a very static sense, then there is no way forward. There will be confrontations. Last point, I think the protectionism, be it in India, China, and the Belt and Road Initiative, is not a time to discuss. We do not need any further trade protections. This will really kill, the growth of the world. Presently, we are already in the negative zone, in the recession. And we do not know when it will come back. No studies I have seen that they are giving clearly that this will be the path of recovery. So in the short run, cooperation, collaboration, learning from each other in the health sector, in the post-COVID areas, good. Second, for medium to to long term, we need to find out if there are more disruptions, more hazards in terms of building each other's economies. Then we need to look a new strategy. Last, that we, of course, we are connected. We will be more connected in the post-COVID. One should not think that this COVID will, is going to disrupt and put every country in lockdown. So lockdown is a temporary phenomena, which individually, but countries will never be locked down. They have to open up. They have to open their economies. They need to connect their, capitals, the ports, the shipping. All these things need to come back, but with a new template, as I have said. And this is where the shippers, the freight forwarder, the custom house agent, the WTO, World Customs Organization, international bodies, they are in discussions. So if India and China, this is the time, the Southern solidarity, they should join, and then they can make the new rules for a new world. And of course, India will benefit out of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Prabir Dey. That was excellent. Thank you for being sticking to the time limit. Could I now turn to Mr. Nasser Shirazi of Pakistan? He is the president of the Center for Pakistan and Gulf Studies. He's a lawyer by profession, but also interested in international studies. And his area of specialization is China-Pakistan relations. Sir, if I could request you to speak for up to 7 minutes. And also tell us not only your views on the Belt and Road Initiative as a whole, but also on the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. And there are a couple of questions already online about whether this China-Pakistan Economic Corridor will push Pakistan into a debt trap. If I could request you to answer those questions. Also, I remember from my days in Islamabad that most of my Pakistani friends would say that CPEC, or the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, is a game changer. So if you could explain to us why it is looked at as a game changer. So if I could give the floor to you, Mr. Nazar Shirazi, please.
Excuse me.
Mr. Shirazi?
Is that
Yes,
my
please.
voice clear
Please go
to
ahead.
you?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you.
Is that Mr. Shirazi?
Thank you for inviting me.
Please go
And also the question you raised regarding CPEC, I will try to answer in a brief. And inshallah, I will try to be confined in my time.
So
as you know,
आपका look kindly check with your look. I mean, it's ये tilt आ रहा है आपका.
So
please put your phone horizontal. Please put your phone. Please put your
do you
phone
want
horizontal.
to change the screen? Is that okay right now?
Right, sir.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that okay?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
So, as you know, every mega economic project has its political, strategic, and security perspective and implications. And same is the case with the BRI, and as CPEC is considered, same is the case with them. China, no doubt, mainly relies on its economic power, but at the same time, China is making efforts to enhance its regional outreach and global influence through military means, through other strategic means. Chinese pattern, while considering world affairs, is different to the pattern adopted by United States. Hello. When post-COVID world, in my opinion and my studies, will naturally different, but supposition that all new world is going to be emerge is, I think, wrong. Corona pandemic is not on rise, but gradually declining trend is being witnessed throughout the world. So it can be said that high time, Corona pandemic high time is over, and normalization of activities started in some parts of the world, especially in Italy, you can see, and in different other parts of the world. So because I am focusing on contemporary regional affairs in context of Corona pandemic, and what you mentioned, effect on CPEC and relevance of OBI. China very wisely converted this threat into an opportunity, and the result is not only able to safeguard its own economy, but will be able to facilitate BRI countries in a more comprehensive way. China succeeded in eradicating Corona pandemic at home, and now you can see that all businesses in China are being opened, and China has an upper hand in this context because rest of the world is struggling, especially a developed world where there is a lot of industry in America, in Europe. They all are in struggling phase. China has not only recovered, but his economy restarted, you can say. And no doubt, when there all of the world is suffering, China will suffer, but will suffer least as compared to the other economies suffering right now. So China became the first to overcome from pandemic, and is in the position to help others to deal with the situation. So you can see what China has did in this context related to the countries related to CPEC and also OBI. China helped only European country, is the Italy. China helped Italy a lot, but European Union failed to help Italy in that context. America and European Union, they have issues regarding dealing with the situation of corona pandemic, and China helped all of them in a very wise way. So China psychologically won the game in this context. Not only they eradicated the disease at their home, but overall by helping the CPEC and by helping the countries involved in OBI, they succeeded psychologically, and it has a lot of importance when we deal with international affairs. Chinese energy also benefited by the oil prices, lowest in its history. So Chinese economy will gain. So in my opinion, dependence of BRI members on China, or you can say their mutual interaction. So outcome after this disease is that both are the beneficiaries. China became the country supporting all countries facing this dilemma, and all countries saw China as the country supporting them in this hard time. So BRI will become more relevant in this regard. On the other hand, obviously, world order is being changed, and it is tilted toward multipolar world. I can say that yes, China is emerging as a even not only China emerging, but the world is reshaping, and multipolar world will re-emerge after a lot of time. All European Union and USA are facing political deviance at home, while China is free from all those issues, enabling China to take serious decision, aggressive and bold steps in world affairs. But in future, China will not be a new colonial power, but some sort of interdependence and sharing will prevail in Chinese relation to BRI countries and rest of the world. China also trying to convince whole South Asian countries that militant organization, which you mentioned in your outline, or extremist organization, they are not in benefit of any of them. So they should be eradicated. There should be a joint venture against all those militant organizations. So this will, because in the region, when Pakistan and CPEC is considered militant organization or a threat to CPEC and CPEC activities, which you mentioned in your outline. So China is succeeded in bringing all actors on same page, that these are the organization, they are on the same time threat for China, for CPEC, for the region, and for whole of the world. So I think India should also accept this. Secondly, peace and stability is not only in Chinese interest, but in interest of all countries of region. So India should be a part in stability by considering CPEC as a project of regional interest. If I consider just only regional interest, then CPEC is in interest of both countries. China, India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh make up a big portion of world population. Stability, progress, and development in the region may help bring 7.6 million people through OBI out of poverty, contributing in elimination of poverty source to extremism. So skepticism should not take high place in decision making, but a position competing to enhance cooperation and to enhance GOP of regional state, to enhance economic progress in the region should be started. US role in Asia is also declining, but you mentioned regarding the 4-country alliance in which India is the part. and that is overall considered as an effort to check the Chinese influence in the sea and in the region. In my opinion, America and American policies were not successful in Gulf, in Middle East, and in this part of Asia at least. So that is not a successful model adopted by American. So there was another question: what would be the effectivity of this quadrant coalition? In my opinion, a regional cooperation should exist there. China should be part of that regional cooperation. India should be part of that regional cooperation. Pakistan should be part of that regional cooperation, because CPEC is in a mutual interest of China and Pakistan. But you questioned, I want to answer regarding decision making of CPEC in Pakistan. There is no specific political party in government that can decide any mega decision. There is a system. All political parties and all decision maker of state are together regarding CPEC. So there is unanimity in Pakistan, and Pakistan has maintained its interest while dealing with Chinese regarding CPEC and its projects. And Pakistan is benefiting not only economically, but regarding many other, especially security measures are being taken, and this not only in the interest of China and Pakistan, but also in the interest of whole of the region. So my take over the issue is, I want that skepticism should come to an end. China should take, India should also take it as a positive activity. A positive competition regarding economic competition should be started, and we must concentrate over our populations, and how this project and the activities on the corner of this project can bring millions of people out of the poverty line which they are suffering right now. So that's my take regarding this pandemic and post-COVID world. My summary is that in post-COVID-19 world, CPEC and OBI will be more relevant than it was earlier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nazar Shirazi, for your comments. Let me now turn quickly to Ms. Ksenia Kuzmina. She's from the Russian International Affairs Council, specializes on India, also follows the Belt and Road Initiative. Madam, I hope you're with us online, and I would like to give the floor to you. If you can make some initial remarks on how BRI will be impacted in the post-COVID world, or how the post-COVID world will shape the Belt and Road Initiative. And then let's try to quickly go through our speakers and then make this into a discussion rather than just remarks. So the floor is yours, Ms. Ksenia Kuzmina.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. And first, I would like to thank the Global Counterterrorism Council for the invitation. It's my pleasure and an honor to find myself among such prominent speakers. And I think we've had a very interesting, and we will continue having a very interesting discussion on the future of the BRI. And first, I'd start with outlining the challenges we now see that have been underlined by the current COVID-19 crisis. These are both global, regional, and national challenges. As I say, India is one of the countries hit by COVID. That's the same for Pakistan and Sri Lanka, and Russia is now heavily hit by COVID. So, and that's true for a lot of our neighbors and other countries. We're all experiencing quite difficult times, and now there are a lot of talks about how we would come out from this COVID-19 pandemic and what world we would come into. And I hear a lot of discussions that now the global world will be different, and a lot of contradicting opinions saying, no, the global order will be just the same. Just, you know, some national states will rise. There will be more use of electronic devices for controlling citizens, but the world will still be the same. I'd say that I wouldn't see a lot of major and, you know, core changes to the global world and global order itself. But I think that the COVID-19 has underlined a lot of challenges. It has shown us the fragility and inefficiency of a lot of multilateral, global, and regional organizations, and social and economic outcomes and impacts of COVID will provoke a lot of crisis and will inevitably lead to the rise of conventional threats and social unrest, and there will be, I think, more space for terrorism and conflict potential. And for conflict potential in the time to come. And I think that one of the main development we should now follow, both in terms of global impact and development of the global situation, and in terms of analyzing the BRI situation, is the growing rivalry between the US and China, because I think that this pandemic has it has been a major factor in pushing forward this rivalry that previously manifested mainly in economic and technical areas, and to a less extent in the regional areas. So I think that we might now see a growing bipolarity between China and the United States, and it will be true for the Asia-Pacific, Indo-Pacific region as a whole, and the Belt and Road Initiative will be more and more seen in this context. I'd agree with distinguished participants who said that we shouldn't see the BRI as some part of major China strategy to dominate the world or spread its influence in all the regions. It's more or less a strategy to boost economic growth, to promote bilateral and multilateral partnership for with regional partners all over the world, and to find new sources of growth. Of course, as such a big initiative, it has a lot of strategic implications, and I think that now the strategic and security complications will be more and more exacerbated with this growing US-China rivalry and overall crises provoked by the COVID-19 pandemic. Still, I wouldn't think that the pandemic will prevent the BRI from existing or from spreading. I think it will have some short-term impact on its development, because of course now, due to these anti-epidemic measures, some projects must have been suspended, a lot of business contacts must have been suspended, and there are some anti-China sentiments in some countries, but I wouldn't overestimate that. And I think that now we are seeing that China is still very strong economically, and if the situation develops along the same lines, it will still be a great supplier of financial resources. And in the post-COVID world, then a lot of the countries will be hit by the pandemic, including economically. They will need more and more Chinese investment. So I think that BRI is a reality and will continue to be a reality. We could deliberate as to what extent it will have a strategic dimension and economic dimension. And my take is that BRI will be more and more strategic initiative, and I think that if this trend for growing US-China bipolarity continues, regional states both taking part in the BRI, cooperating with BRI, or trying to avoid cooperating with BRI, as India will have to choose sides. And it's especially true for Russia, which is not part of the BRI but is developing cooperation with China in the framework of the initiative and aligning its promoted by Eurasian Economic Union, promoted by Russia with the BRI. And I would say that it's not in Russia, nor in India's, nor in Sri Lanka's or Pakistan's interest to be forced to be part of this bipolar, to a certain extent, world. I think we need to promote a more cooperative agenda in Eurasia. We could argue that it should not be specifically under the BRI umbrella. BRI is, as I mentioned, as I said, a reality, and we have to live with that. And we need to in any case, we will need to cooperate with that and to build stronger ties with China, including for security reasons, to promote stability in the region, and including for economic reasons. But what we need is a more cooperative agenda, and I think it's important, for example, for Russia and for India to push it forward, because in case that strategic rivalry between China and US grows, and the current existing threats of terrorism, of regional instability in the post-COVID world, I think will be only exacerbated. There will be a lack of constructive and cooperative agenda. We have, I think, a lot of existing already platforms such as the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, such as BRICS, or other platforms that we could use to promote these interactions. So I think I would stop with that, because a lot of the things I said were already said by different speakers.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kuzmina, for your comments and your remarks. Thank you for sticking to the time also. Let me quickly move on to Captain Alok Bansal, formerly of the Indian Navy, but in the recent past, he has been with several think tanks in Delhi, with the National Maritime Foundation, with the Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis, and currently with the India Foundation. Captain Bansal, if I could request you, the floor is yours. Please make your comments and remarks as short as possible, 5 to 6 minutes if possible. I'm sorry about that. So that we can have more of a discussion. Thank you, sir. Please.
Thank you so much, sir. We'll just take 5 minutes. I just wanted to make some initial comments because unlike my previous speaker, what I feel is that Belt and Road Initiative was an extremely ambitious project. And what is the impact of COVID on the global economy is that the economy is going to go into a decline. Although IMF claims that India and China would still end the year in a positive note, but the fact is that the global demand is going to contract. So BRI was actually premised on a huge consumption, where our factory places in different along the corridor would actually supply. Now, if there is a demand contraction, its economic viability comes under question. Second is the projects for BRI. The funding for them, because it was the Chinese surplus that was actually going to fund them. Now, because of COVID, even though China has recovered considerably well, and probably post-COVID world order would see China assume a greater role than probably it was in, because as of now, at least, it's actually a little premature. But as I see, the post-COVID world order would see some amount of diminishing of the role of the West, because at least as far as the state appears as of now, because it is the Europe and the US which are very badly affected by this thing. And I don't think so that economies are going to come out of this recession very fast. So, but despite that, the Chinese reserves are going to get consumed. So I think there is going to be certain amount of slowing down of the BRI projects. And when we talk about BRI projects, I would like to focus more on CPEC, that is China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, because the other 4 land corridors and the maritime corridors are more or less in different stages. But from our point of view, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor is very, very important. But before coming there, just wanted to give 2-3 more other issues. My previous speaker said that the Chinese investment would be welcomed. It doesn't seem so, because we saw what Japan has come out. Japan is now funding its companies to pull out of China. Whether we like it or not, there is a latent anti-Chinese sentiment which prevails through the West. So many of the governments in the West are likely to probably push their supply lines away from China. They would like to diversify their supply lines. They wouldn't want to depend totally on one single agenda and one single country. That is what is my perception. So this diversification will take place. Now, all these things will raise a big, big question mark on the economic viability of the BRI. At least all the various tracks, various corridors, that 5 figures and others, maritime corridor, etc., which are being worked out, there will be a serious question. Coming to China-Pakistan economic corridor, in fact, Pakistan is going through a crisis. In fact, there is a huge problem within Pakistan as to how they should deal with COVID-19 crisis. In fact, there is the country has not been able to decide whether it should go for lockdown or not, although the numbers have been rising. Consequently, Chinese personnel who were working on various projects have gone back. A large number of power plants have come up because of, as part of BRI, as part of CPEC, but the demand has actually shrunk. Many of these power plants are actually coal-based power plants which have been relocated from China because of climate reasons, where China opted for a greener technology. They were shifted to Pakistan. But now with the demand shrinking and the higher cost of production, there are big question marks whether these would be economically viable. Of course, CPEC has a huge strategic implication because it brings China virtually at the gate of Persian Gulf, which is geostrategically a very significant region, where we have a huge American presence. Even though US is independent as far as energy is concerned, US allies are still dependent on energy resources from Persian Gulf, which means Europe and Japan and many other countries which are allies of the US are still dependent. And consequently, Persian Gulf is going to be important. Let's see how it works out. As of now, Gwadar port is operational, but not economically viable. China has overtaken the operations. China, there are reports that they are trying to develop geostrategic assets out there. But as of now, the connectivity of Gwadar port, which is actually the terminal for CPEC, is virtually along the coast, which makes it economically unviable. It is far more viable to transport goods from Karachi than to take almost to Karachi and then take them along road. So that is one of the issues. There are numerous issues which are being discussed. At this juncture, to me, it seems that COVID-19 is definitely a setback for BRI projects. How much and for how long will it differ depends on the intensity of COVID-19, because as of now, we are still only making speculative assessment as to when the world will return back to normal. What will be the new normal? All these are question marks at this stage. I would like to wind up. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Captain Bansal. And let me quickly turn to our last speaker, which is Mr. Lucio Pitlow. I'm sorry to have kept you waiting, Mr. Pitlow, but he's a foreign affairs and security analyst, specializes in the Asia Pacific. He's a lecturer on international studies at De La Salle University in the United States. Mr. Pitlow, the floor is yours, please.
Good evening to you, Ambassador. How is my signal?
Perfect.
It's good. It's very good. Thank you. We can hear you very clearly. Please go ahead.
Okay. Before I give my remarks, I would just like to again thank Aditya for convening this very timely and relevant discussion. I'm delighted to join this stellar cast of speakers discussing this topic of the Belt and Road Initiative and how will the pandemic affect this initiative of China going forward. So, Ambassador, thank you for doing this moderating role. I would focus my remarks on 4 key points. So the first one is the crisis looms for the Belt and Road, but there are silver linings. So as mentioned by earlier speakers, China already had an early lead in terms of containing and recovering from the COVID, but its long-term success, including the Belt and Road Initiative, will hinge a lot on the recovery of other countries. So China is the world's largest manufacturing and trading nation and is a growing technology power. And this close integration with the global economy means that China will have a greater interest in seeing global recovery at the soonest possible time. A long-term slump in global demand and downgraded growth forecasts will not bode well for participating countries as much as it is with China. So I expect to see China sustaining an activist foreign policy playing a greater role in trying to redefine or reform a wide range of governance agendas, not only from health, but also from trade, development, and technology, because these are all can be part of the 5 connectivities under the Belt and Road. The second point I'd like to make is that the Belt and Road will certainly decelerate. It may become more modest, but it will not necessarily grind to a halt. So BRI is not only an economic undertaking, it's very much also a signature strategic and foreign policy initiative of China. So it will likely be sustained, although on a more subdued scale. So the resumption of Belt and Road projects would depend on a wide range of factors. So the speed of recovery of China and participating countries, the stimulus package that China and the rest of the world will pump in to try to kickstart the economy again, the easing of travel and logistics restrictions to allow for the resumption of labor and supply chains. I expect to see a lot of short-term hurdles, as the other speakers had mentioned. So for one, it may, for instance, lessen the appetite for risky projects, which is good. It might invite Beijing to exert greater oversight over projects being entered into by Chinese companies, especially state-owned enterprises. Their economy is already overly leveraged, and they don't want to accumulate any further bad debts. Even before the onset of the pandemic, there is already moves towards this direction. So we see for China, for instance, signing up memorandums of understandings with several countries and with several multilateral development lending institutions to try to build capacity for feasibility study. So on another note, I also see that there would be a fresh round of possible debt relief or debt renegotiations. So participating countries would certainly join in this conversation to try to minimize their exposure and find a way to continue on with the projects that were already signed or are already in progress even before the pandemic came in. I don't see China acquiring distressed assets because of the adverse reaction from past experience. I think our colleague from Sri Lanka can enlighten us more on that. My third point, there are other aspects of the BRI that would likely obtain greater attention in light of this pandemic. So I see two parts of the Belt and Road that is underappreciated but might get more traction post-pandemic. One is the Health Silk Road, which is gaining some ground already because of China's medical diplomacy. The second one would be the Digital Silk Road, which I think is more important. So on the Health Silk Road, there are a lot of issues with that for now. Of course, I think it may increase efforts to try to coordinate, if not harmonize, health, quarantine regulations, medical and scientific cooperation. So China will certainly try to leverage its experience in dealing with the pandemic, try to share best practices. It had dispatched medical experts and pump in medical supplies abroad. So that I think would likely be sustained going forward. Of course, there are complaints and issues in relation to Chinese medical supplies, and I feel that it behooves upon China to try to institute greater quality controls for their exports. So as not, because setbacks will always tarnish the image of China. The Digital Silk Road that I mentioned earlier, so mobile and e-commerce might get a big boost because of this pandemic. So it might accelerate applications of innovations in communications, logistics, fintech, and of course, we know India is a big player on that also. So I expect a lot of hurdles for China on the Digital Silk Road. It will not be smooth sailing because of for one, security risks or perceived or otherwise in relation to dealing or working with Chinese companies like Huawei, Tencent, Alibaba. So this issue of trust and transparency, they're not going to dissipate easily. And my last point, Professor Singh mentioned this also earlier. I feel that the post-pandemic BRI would be more multilateral. So why? Because I think China needs to do that to try to spread out the risks. So China, I think, would be more willing to work with more creditors, lenders, and more development assistance partners. So there are already steps towards this direction that were made by China even before pandemic hit. So, for instance, co-financing arrangements between the the Japan-led Asian Development Bank and the China-led Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. So there are already projects where these two MDBs have been cooperating. I expect to see more of that post-pandemic. So getting more partners on board will be very important for China, not only to spread risks, but also to bring in more experience, bring in more expertise, especially in the areas of due diligence, project assessment, and most importantly, to soften potential public opposition compared if the projects would be just China alone or China up and center. So if there would be more partners on board, it may dissipate that potential opposition. I also think that there would be more efforts to revisit local content policies, and this resonates well with the growing desire for self-reliance among member countries. So this would be good for participating countries of the Belt and Road because they might try to renegotiate for more share of local labor, local expertise, local suppliers whenever they are available and whenever they meet the desired standards. In addition to that, I think there would be more effort to try to increase local transfer of skills, knowledge, and technology, and that would make the initiative more sustainable going forward. I would end there and would be more than happy to take in questions during the conversations later. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. I think, thank you so much, Mr. Pitlow, and thank you for your remarks. Let's move quickly into questions. I think there are already a whole lot of questions which are online, but one group of questions is about the viability of BRI projects, especially in a post-COVID world where, as Captain Alok Bansal mentioned, that economies have all been hit and economic growth rates are going to drop in the immediate aftermath in the next couple of years. And the question is about the viability of BRI projects, whether countries think that they are going to be pushed into a debt trap. And let me aim those questions at General Ratnaike, to Mr. Shirazi from Pakistan, General Ratnaike from Sri Lanka, and Dr. Prabir Dey from India. If I could first turn to General Ratnaike, sir, do you visualize greater debt issues for Sri Lanka as we move ahead in the post-COVID world?
Yeah, thank you very much. And we are, of course, at this moment of time, since all the factors that we were discussing due to pandemic and due to economic downturns before the pandemic, Sri Lanka is in kind of a trouble. We have not been doing well for last 5 years economically. So what the expectations when the Chinese loans were coming here could not, the previous government, for last 5 years, we couldn't reach the goal that we planned in advance. As a result, as you mentioned, we are kind of in a position now economically in a bad shape. So the payments of loans, not only to Chinese, but even to the other countries that we have taken. So we are in a difficulty. So I am not saying it is kind of a Chinese trap, but anyway, you know, we have a difficulty at this moment of time.
Thank you, General. Could I turn with that same question to Mr. Shirazi from Pakistan? Mr. Shirazi, a lot of people are asking online whether, you know, with these huge projects in CPEC, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, whether there's a danger of China of Pakistan getting into a debt trap? Please, if you could answer those questions. Thank you.
Sir, you are on mute, sir.
Yeah, no, I was on mute, but Mr. Shirazi, did you hear my question?
Nasir Shirazi, your mic is on mute. Please unmute it. Nasir Shirazi, your mic is mute. Please unmute it.
I think Nazir is disconnected. I see his frame is frozen as far as I am concerned.
Okay, then could I turn to Dr. Prabir Dey? Dr. Dey, if you could throw some light on this question about increasing indebtedness as a result of some of these BRI projects. If I could turn to you, Dr. Prabir Dey.
Sir, some of the countries, those which have already taken money, sir, we know very well that BRI money is not a free lunch. Most of it is through the usual debt route. Some of it are kind of a technical assistance. Now, the countries like Sri Lanka, Laupedia, where the projects are ongoing, railway line, port development, financial city development, extension of highways, etc. These are continuing because these have already taken and given support by their central bank and the government. Now, if you come to the next post-COVID area, the countries will certainly be tempted to borrow more, but given their home obligations, they will not go to China anymore. For the time being, there will be some sort of a moratorium that Chinese authority will automatically offer to these countries who are borrowing. So to me, say, if we are out of this pandemic in the first phase by, say, early next year, then, you know, the countries like, if I may, some African countries, South Asian countries, Southeast Asian countries, they will be busy to restructure. And the projects they have taken the loan from Chinese authority, which is infrastructure in nature, that can generate employment, jobs, some activities. So they will continue, but no further. No new loan they will apply for it if not required. That's my seed. So indebtedness or new kind of a debt doesn't appear, at least for 1 year, 2 years. But what will happen after 2 years, I'm not sure. It is big questions. We cannot say right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Prabir Dey. I can see that we have Mr. Krishan Verma, one of our council members, online. And I would like to turn to him if he is connected with us to request him to give some of his views and comments on this whole question. Mr. Krishan Verma, are you online, please? And if you are, can I leave the floor to you for some of your comments, maybe remarks and questions if there are any, of course. Mr. Verma? I think you're...
Ambassador Bambawale, could I take a minute on this then?
Yes. Is that Professor Swaran?
Professor Swaran Singh.
Yeah,
yes.
please go ahead, Professor. There are some questions aimed at you also. So if you could take a look at the questions and also go ahead with your answers. Thank you.
Okay, let me just first say on this BRI, definitely shrinking, slowing down for a period of time. But what are the alternatives for the countries who are recipients? I do not see too many alternatives in terms of financial muscle of other nations being able to come and build either parallel projects. They would definitely not like to support recipient countries to repay the loans that these countries owe to China, because that will mean they are helping the Chinese economy to grow better. China will have to definitely give the debt relief, as typically happens. It may have to give more loans to retrieve the loans that it has already given to these countries. And China, to some extent, both for its financial muscle but also for the nature of politics that it has, of stable one-party control, as it appears, will be able to do that, I suppose, and then kind of muddle through this difficult time, I suppose, and sustain BRI at a really slow motion over a period of time. I don't see that alternatives will be able to overtake the BRI, because alternatives have been tried for about last 10 years now and have not delivered. I mean, let me just, in 5 seconds, just say last line. I understand all of India's neighbors have first opted for India's help on infrastructure building. It's only when India was not able to deliver that they have gone to China. So, even if countries might like other options as better options, but if those options don't deliver, then I think all of them will end up going back to China, and BRI will continue, but it will transform itself, as I said earlier.
Thank you very much, Professor Swaran Singh, for those comments. I see that Swati Prabhu has a number of questions, at least a couple. And if she's online, I would request her to actually ask those questions, both of Professor Swaran Singh and anyone else in the panel. Is Swati Prabhu online? And Madam, why don't you ask your questions in person online?
Yes, sir. Sir, can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible. Please go ahead with your questions. I think you have at least 2 or 3 questions, and please.
Yes, sir.
Say who they are. Thank you.
Yes, sir. So I have a couple of questions. My first question is addressed to Professor Swaran Singh. I was wondering, how in the post-COVID world, when we talk about maritime security, how it could possibly impact India-China maritime relations. How it would possibly impact India-China maritime relations, and talking about Indo-Pacific region. And the second question I have is concerning development aid or development partnership when we talk about BRI projects. And this question is addressed to Professor Dr. Prabir Dey. So how does he, sir, how do you view again in the post-COVID world, how do you think will there be a paradigm shift when we talk about development aid and BRI, and not just for China, but also what would be the impact as far as India is concerned in the South Asian region? Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Swati. Could I turn first to Professor Swaran Singh, and then also ask Captain Alok Bansal to address that question on Indo-Pacific maritime security, etc., and then move to Dr. Prabir Dey. So Professor Swaran Singh, and followed by Captain Bansal, followed by Dr. Dey, please.
Thank you, Ambassador Bambawale. I think it's an interesting picture that we noticed appearing in China-India maritime equations, where till early 1990s, China's focus was towards the Pacific Ocean, first, second, and third chain of islands. And then it shifted to Indian Ocean since then. And it will depend on Indian Navy's center in Gurgaon, which goes by something called automatic identification systems of ships that kind of traverse in these waters. In last 3 years, about 600 fishing boats, among others, have been spotted. And in that sense, there is increasing presence of China's destroyers, patrol boats, even submarines, particularly from 2008, when they became part of Japan, India, United States, Russia, patrolling for anti-piracy in especially Gulf of Aden, etc. So fundamentally, the point, there is definitely an increasing presence of China in Indian Ocean and maritime waters. And India has both, concerns. It has repeatedly warned Chinese ships when they enter India's EEZ. It has also simultaneously worked together with Chinese Navy in countering anti-piracy threats in Gulf of Aden. The last point, I think, which Captain Bansal will, I think, expand is on Quad and on Indo-Pacific, where India really stands out among the Quad members, first of all, for not being the alliance partner with the United States, but more importantly, by underlining from the Shangri-La speech of Prime Minister Modi onwards, that India would not like to see this debate on Indo-Pacific emerging as a strategy, as a club, which is exclusive and militarized, which is against any third country. Indeed, we have particularly put this Indo-Pacific as an item on India-China annual maritime dialogue. India stands out as the only country which has tried to bring China into Indo-Pacific debates and discourses. And I think interesting it is even now that when the entire Western world is criticizing China, you notice India's response to China, and China is also receiving certain help from China. India gave help to China. So India's approach, I think, is very interesting, and particularly the new kind of genre of that both cooperation and contestation is particularly interesting when it comes to maritime equations and interface.
Captain Bansal.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, as far as maritime security is concerned, we need to understand that China is overwhelmingly dependent on Indian Ocean. In fact, not only a large amount of its goods travel to West Asia, Africa, etc. through Indian Ocean, but primarily bulk of its energy imports actually emanate in Persian Gulf and West Asia and transit through Indian Ocean and then go through Southeast Asian countries, the narrow straits of Southeast Asia, and then go to China. The Chinese maritime trade is extremely vulnerable as far as Indian Ocean is concerned. And till a decade or decade and a half back, Chinese Navy did not have the wherewithal to operate in Indian Ocean with impunity. But over the years, what we have seen is that the Chinese Navy has acquired the capacity. And in fact, firstly, they started coming to Indian Ocean at the garb of doing anti-piracy patrol, as Professor Swarn Singh stated. But what was very, very significant from our point of view was that that showed Chinese Navy's capacity to sustain a ship here. And then, of course, that's been going on. And now that's been followed by their base coming up in Djibouti. Now you have Gwadar coming up, which they keep repeating that there's no maritime, there's no security angle to it. But please understand, north of Gwadar already a Pakistan naval base has come up. And Pakistani analysts do not tire saying that there is a security angle involved as far as China coming here. So at least even if China wants to deny, Pakistan has been trying to say so. So these are issues of concerns. But let me make it one thing very clear. As of date, Indian Navy, as far as Indian Ocean is concerned, is in a far stronger position vis-a-vis the Chinese Navy. We have a lot of advantages. If you look at in any way militarily, you look at it, we have advantage. Now coming to Quad, India has always liked to hedge our bets. See, Indians culturally are for strategic autonomy. India is not a country which is going to give up its strategic autonomy, and that's what I tell Americans all the time. That if you expect that India is going to be an Australia or a Japan, no. Unfortunately, India cannot be an Australia or a Japan. And that factor has to be understood. So India is not going for a military alliance, but Quad is definitely a option. And we support Americans' insistence on freedom of navigation. As far as South China Sea is concerned, our stand is unambiguous. We have good relations with most of the countries. We have never accepted those dotted lines which China claim as their internal waters. Not even a territorial waters, they claim it as an internal waters. So that is where it is. But I don't think so India would like to become an ally of the US. I don't think so it's looking at that particular thing. So that is as far as it is. As of now, maritime security, we are still secure, but we have to be worried because Chinese bases are increasing. They already have a base in Djibouti, which gives them greater turnaround time because that gives their ships sustainability into the Indian Ocean region. And now, of course, if they have, because Gwadar port is operated now by a Chinese company, Karachi port also, they have got a significant stake. There are so many ports which are being run. Hambantota is, of course, operated by Chinese. I'm not trying to say these are military or security positions, but it gives them turnaround time. If a port is being run by them, their ships can come around, get bunker, move around. That facility comes up. So their sustainability increases as far as the Indian Ocean region is concerned.
Thank you. Dr. Prabir Dey. Dr. Dey.
A minute. Can you hear me?
Yes, sure.
At the moment, we are not talking about BRI loan or any kind of a technical financing, funding, etc. This is not the time. Now, what's aid, development aid, from China or so forth, matter any other country will go if it is in health services. Now, again, if the countries are doing well, if they are having a feel good, economies are coming out well from the recession, then countries might think whether they will borrow money, if not, whether not from China, maybe from other source. So here comes the Indian opportunities, the new destination for India's line of credit, India's development aid in the neighborhood in particular. So I think this is what we can assume that the way forward for the Chinese BRI money, or for that matter for other companies coming in place as a replacement of China. But there are many other things that we need to factor in. Energy projects, Chinese money, this is all in Pakistan and CPEC, if I know. So in the South Asia region, there is no such kind of an energy project. The Chinese BRI money is coming. So I just to clarify, CPEC, I'm not an expert. There are many here who can give a better response to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dey. We have a couple of questions from Aditya Kumar Singh. Aditya, I was wondering if Aditya Kumar Singh, I'm wondering if you're online and if you would like to ask those questions yourself. If you would, then the floor is yours, please.
Yes, sir, I'm there. I'm here, sir.
Please go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Yes, thank you, sir. So I have 3 quick questions. First is for Lucio. He mentioned about the Health Silk Road. I have a question. Given the quality issues with the Chinese medical supply, will it not create a trust deficit amongst the nations, which will eventually have a negative impact on the BRI projects? And the second one is for Captain Alok Bansal. Should India not be thinking of expanding this Quad to infrastructure creating grouping? In a sense that these 4 nations could come up together and create infrastructures as a counter to BRI. It might help their strategic purposes. And the third question is to Professor Swaran Singh. Sir, will India be able to save itself from joining the criticizing group of nations for the crisis, especially given the dominating nature of President of the United States? He tends to get a bit dominating over the allies. So what are their takes? Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much, Aditya Kumar Singh, for those questions. So I think the first question was addressed to Mr. Lucio Pitlow, the next one to Captain Alok Bansal, and the third one to Professor Swaran Singh. So if I could turn to you, Mr. Pitlow, and request you to try to answer that question of Aditya Kumar Singh's. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you, Mr. Singh, for that question. So as I mentioned earlier in my remarks, so certainly those issues of product defects, complaints about the quality, defective test kits, or face masks that do not meet the quality requirements of destination countries, they will certainly affect China's medical diplomacy and will undermine China's medical outreach overseas. I mentioned earlier the need for China to try to address those concerns by improving export quality measures to make sure that medical supplies, whether they are donated or whether they are sold, will be those that meet basic standard quality requirements. And if they are destined for countries like Europe with much higher standards, then they should meet those standards as well. I think it also behooves upon countries that try to procure or buy medical supplies from China to also undertake their due diligence. They have to make sure that they're dealing with the right suppliers, that they are vetted suppliers, that these suppliers have good track records. It might help, for instance, if they check it with their local embassy, I mean, the Chinese embassy in their country, or discuss these matters with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to try to make sure that these are from qualified suppliers and that there would be no issues with the quality. It's probable that some of those quality issues will be addressed as China's production improves and more work returns to normal. So yeah, I think on the short term it will affect China's medical diplomacy, but on the long term, I hope it will be addressed. I think it is being addressed, maybe not in the sufficient scale that many countries would wish, but certainly China is looking into this.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pitlow. The next question was addressed to Captain Alok Bansal. So, Captain Bansal, if you would like to take the floor, please.
I just wanted to say, because he was asking me whether Quad can be used to build up infrastructure. And now the point is, India has been working on Act East policy. None of the support has come actually, except for Japan, which has shown some interest in some of the corridors and other things. The US and Australia have not really been very keen on investing in this particular projects of ours as far as connectivity is concerned. As far as security projects are there, yes, we have interoperability, because all this Quad is nothing but interoperability, the ability of the navies to operate together. Because it takes time to understand. You just can't bring two navies and start operating together. Now, what Quad has achieved is that over these years, we have achieved a success as far as interoperability is concerned. And should there be a requirement, we now have the capacity to operate with these navies, and we can operate and carry out a joint project. That's about it all. I think if Japan or somebody starts investing, because India's Act East policy looking at Southeast Asia is a very, very big thing. And especially in a post-COVID world, when many countries of Southeast Asia would be looking to diversify their supply chain, I think a road link from India would be a wonderful proposition if India wants to actually emerge as a major player in the global supply chain.
Thank you, Captain. Thank you so much for your the points you have made in reply to that question. And the last question was addressed to Professor Swaran Singh. If I could yield the floor to you, Professor Swaran Singh, please.
Thank you, Ambassador. Aditya, I think, asked me a very specific question. If India would be pushed to join the criticizing countries, and what it will mean for India's relations with China. I think Captain Bansal said it before. India is a rather large and important country to be pushed around. And I think that is not likely to happen. India has clearly followed a kind of a multi-alignment policy. And the greatest attraction that India holds for major powers, including China, is its market. And of course, you could add several other things like population, diaspora, democracy, demographic dividend of young people. So India has its own enormous assets, including of soft power, to put them to use. And one good example, I could give several, is that very few leaders around the world have, kind of managed a good relationship with the President Trump that you mentioned. And Indian Prime Minister is an exception in that sense, of having managed the relationship. And, likewise, in entire Middle East countries that don't see eye to eye with each other are all okay with India. You could look at Israel, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Israel. India has managed good diplomatic relationship. Credit also goes to the whole diplomatic corps that sort of does the footwork behind Prime Minister's initiatives. So India is too important to be pushed. I think India itself will decide what it wants to do. And it has been definitely sort of playing under its weight in that sense, very clearly hedging rather than either contesting or confronting situations. And in that sense, it has constantly been balancing is what it has been trying. And I think it will be effort of Indian diplomacy to not to be pushed to an either or situation. And so far, I think it has managed really well.
Thank you so much, Professor Singh. I think Ms. Cleo Pascal is online with us and is, I think she would like to make a few remarks, comments, questions. So, Ms. Pascal, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Hi, thank you very much for this incredibly interesting discussion. I'm grateful to you and to GCTC for letting this happen. Yeah, there was just in terms of informational points, if it's helpful, on the infrastructure issue, both the US and Japan are very interested in trying to offer alternatives to China, although of course the amounts and the conditions will be quite different. The US passed the BUILD Act, which should be supplying at least some level of funding, and Japan in its own small way is also looking at seeing what it can do, especially around gas supplies. I think that's where they're going to be trying to focus on creating alternatives for energy supplies going forward, liquefied natural gas in particular. But the tone of the debate around China and infrastructure and engagement has really, really changed, at least where I am now in the US over the last 3 weeks, approximately. It's become, there's a lot of legislation that's in the process potentially of passing through Congress that may limit the ability to engage with China or put in tariffs or block investment or any of that sort of stuff. And so there's a lot of talk about suing China for the economic fallout of COVID-19. The economy is being decimated here, and I know the situation is even worse in India. And so the question is for the panel, you know, if countries have BRI assets or debts, and there starts to be this groundswell to hold China to account for the damage that specifically the parties' mismanagement of the outbreak, irrespective of the cause, there's clear case to be made that the management, once it was clear there was a problem within China, was disastrous, and they allowed it to spread. And those court cases start to come through. Could some of those BRI assets be held as collateral or payment for the economic damage that China has caused to these countries that it says it's been trying to help economically, but really has damaged so badly through COVID specifically? And since that's the topic of this discussion, I'm just wondering whether some of the much more knowledgeable than I panelists have any insight into whether that might become a negotiating position for some of the BRI countries. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those points. And I was wondering if some of our panelists would like to answer or attempt to answer that last set of questions from Ms. Pascal, you know, about China having to draw down some assets in order to pay any of these monies which you know, may come up in the form of legal fees, etc. So could I turn first to Dr. Prabir Dey and then to perhaps Xenia in Russia? If I could request the two of you to address these questions, please. Dr. Dey, if you're with us, if you could address those questions, please.
Can I say something on compensation and then reparations on
this? Yes, please go ahead, Professor Singh. Yeah.
Okay, I think it's an interesting thing that already in two court cases are filed in the United States. One in Missouri, which I think attorney Eric Smith has already filed a suit. Another class suit was filed in a court in Florida. You know, United States is the only country that can kind of often use domestic legislation to, you know, implement at global level and punish entities and nations and actors abroad. But it's China. I think that makes the difference. Whether those domestic judgments, acts of United States will be able to punish China, I think it's a little far-fetched imagination. We do have international health regulations that provide for adjudication or arbitration. But even for that, you will need China to accept both to ask and to accept that arbitration. And we have a good example of 2016 arbitration in case of South China Sea. China did not participate, did not accept it. So I think it's going to be difficult. One can only raise a rhetoric and do naming, shaming, do politics about it. But China would continue to have what international law experts say, sovereign immunity. And I think it will be a really far-fetched possibility to think that China would be made to pay and will be kind of fixed as a country responsible. Kishore Mehbubani wrote very interesting article about this. And he raises an important question as to where do we begin in blame fixing? You know, economic damage that happened out of, you know, collapse of Lehman Brothers, for example, in 2006-07, would then, you know, Americans be made to pay for the rest of the world? Would somebody pay for Zika virus? Would somebody pay for Ebola? Somebody will pay for HIV and AIDS. So Kishore Mehbubani raises an interesting question as to when in history you begin that blame fixing and punishing countries and asking for reparations and compensation. So I think it's a good, rhetoric. It serves a kind of purpose in an election year in United States. It is nothing beyond that.
Thank you. Can I say something, sir?
Yeah, sure, Prabir. Please go ahead. And Ms. Kuzmina, if you're online, if you could come on next, please.
Sir, to me, can you hear?
Yeah, sure. We can hear you.
Right. So to me, there won't be any kind of a caste transfer because of devastation. Chinese is one party from Beijing to rest of the world. No. What China might be doing, according to me, they will do first more market access in terms of trade. Developing countries, the countries in the European Union, in the China, they will give them more market access in Chinese market, plus Chinese FDI this time, even though you don't want them. This, as I said, that at the moment, 1 year, 1.5 years, kind of, to me, it's not a good time to talk about all this, but once the countries that come back to the pre-pandemic level of the growth and there is a feel good, then China and other countries may negotiate a kind of a compensation, not in cash transfer, or a kind of a money payment, but will be certainly FDI, market access, all this which will help narrow the gap in trade, more capital investments which can create more exports, more jobs in the US, European Union and other countries. So, and the new value chains where Chinese are investing. So this is maybe, some thinking in mind may not be in the current reality because Chinese FDI is banned many countries across the world. But these countries, once they're out from pandemic, they will be looking for fresh capital for the development and also for the growth, and where I think an opportunity for China, also for India, also for ASEAN to invest, to bring back the growth on the normal path. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Ms. Zenia, would you like to address some of those issues?
Yeah, thank you so much, Ambassador.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, if we speak about the possibility of court cases against China and while using the China's proclaimed or alleged fault in spreading COVID in different countries, I actually don't see that happening. I think this will be the case only in the US, and I see these court cases both in the US and the other actions now discussed actually as a part of the strategic rivalry between the US and China, and we see that the Chinese factor is increasingly used in the election campaign in the US, and I think that's in this trend. And for other countries, I think that's first the issue that, as the previous speaker mentioned, it's not actually an established practice to hold a country or some actor accountable for the spread of the virus in case this is not its active actions that provoke the spread of the virus, and it will be extremely difficult from the point of view to prosecute or to seek some damages from China in this point of view. And I think if we speak about countries participating in the BRI, for them, cooperation with China is still very important, and Chinese investment, even if we say that they will be decreased in the coming years, still there are quite a lot of important ties, and I don't think they would like to risk that because those court cases are not of economic nature, they are of purely political nature, and I think serious attention given to them would mean some kind of a strategic conflict with China. That's my take on that.
Thank you.
And if possible, I would like to also comment, as I've seen a question addressed to me, as whether it will be possible. whether it will be possible for Russia to join China in some kind of military conflict with the US or in the Pacific, I don't think that's an option in the near or middle or even long term, because Russia is not an ally of China, and Russia is not going to make an alliance with China, to be in an alliance with China, at least in the near to mid term, if nothing catastrophic happens, I'd say, because for Russia, its autonomy, its independence, it's very valuable. And Russia also values very much its partnerships with different countries in the Indo-Pacific region, for example, with India. And I think if there is a US-China conflict in the Indo-Pacific, it will involve a lot of regional partners, and Russia would not want to join that in no case.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Zenia, for those responses. I can see that Rahul Banerjee has a number of questions. Rahul, would you like to ask them directly yourself? And if you could limit it to 2 questions or maybe 3 questions, because we're slowly running out of time, and I think we must also round up our discussions and see what are the outcomes of this evening's evening here in India discussion. So, Rahul, if you're online and if you would like to ask a couple of questions, please do go ahead, and please do ask your questions and point out to whom they are addressed. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity, sir. My questions are to Nasser Shirazi. So I would like to ask you, what are the counter-terrorism prospects for Pakistan, given the growing and large presence of Chinese forces, Chinese men in Karachi? As you know, there's a major ISI presence in Karachi itself. So how would it impact Pakistani military operations? And my second question it is open for the panel. What are the counterterrorism prospects for the BRI project as a whole? Like we have seen China recruiting Israeli troops to train its men in various places. Also China guarding Afghan border along with Afghan army. So what are the counterterrorism prospects for the BRI project as a whole?
So, Mr. Nasser Shirazi, if you're online and if you've heard those questions, maybe we give the floor to you.
Yes,
please go ahead.
I am online, but my friend's question was not clear to me due to sound issue.
No.
Can you elaborate kindly that for me?
So we are able to hear you. Let me just read out that question. Can you hear me, Mr. Shirazi?
Please.
Yeah, the question is...
Yes, I'm there.
The question is, what effects would Chinese presence in Karachi have on Pakistan military operations, especially counter-terror operations, given that the ISI is also present in Karachi? So that was one of the questions. An earlier question was, is there a danger...
Your voice is also being disconnected.
Yeah, the earlier question was...
So, one question I read in the...
Yeah, please go ahead.
I got that.
Please answer.
You know,
please go ahead and answer that question. I think we may have lost the connection.
Please keep it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. As you know, the roots of IS in Pakistan, they are in tribal areas, not in Karachi, not in Karachi mainly. But yes, there are a few links, because a lot of people of tribal areas used to reside in Karachi, and yes, there are links. And secondly, regarding any IS-linked militants is not in Karachi, that is in interior Balochistan, and in Balochistan is more important because this is the area from where CPEC has to pass and has to be connected with Gwadar port. That is the key route, in fact. But you said that what is the correlation between the Chinese presence and the military operation in Karachi? There is no military operation right now, or even in recent past in Karachi. But yes, there is a big military operation going on called Raddul Azab and Raddul Fasad in tribal areas and the areas linking from Afghanistan and Pakistan. And this is the disturbed area, and the whole activity going on the area is meant to disturb the CPEC activity. Yes, that is there, but operation is going on there. Public support, those militants don't have public support, but yes, that is a guerrilla warfare is there, and practically majority of the land has been gained, and no, there is very off and on there is some issue, but there are no permanent continuous threat right now prevailing in the area. Secondly, there was a question regarding the issue of loans and CPEC. You should keep it in mind that Pakistan has made a strategic decision while going for CPEC. It is in the interest of China, but at the same time, it is in Pakistani interest. Pakistan also wants China to stand with him, not only politically, but geopolitics and economical point of view. That is also important. So I think there few loans will be rescheduled, few loans will be converted into soft loans. But China know the importance of geography of Pakistan and the route of that area linking from Gwadar to China. So there will be no compromise, and there will be no extra burden on Pakistan, keeping in mind the crisis facing Pakistan during the lockdown and whole of the rest of the world, and especially World Bank and other organizations. They came forward to help Pakistan in monetary terms. So I think China will be also among them to help Pakistan, to facilitate Pakistan, because China considers that the importance of this route, and so China also wants the population of this route to be engaged with them, to be not come opposite to them. So I think there will be few reviews, few reschedules, and few loans will be converted into soft loans. China will make all efforts to gain Pakistani support, support of people, support of regime, and support of our different institutions to keep the route active, and the work should be continued there.
Thank you, Mr. Shirazi. And I think we have Sam from Kabul who wants to come in and raise a few points. Sam, if you can hear us, and if you are online, please, the floor is with you, and please go ahead.
Thank you very much, sir. My question to the gentleman from Pakistan: how will Pakistan balance its relationship with China vis-a-vis the US? Because definitely with the US-China rivalry, CPEC is what do they think is US's position on the CPEC and especially on Gwadar? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sam. Mr. Shirazi, if the question was for you,
yes,
and if you could just answer very quickly, because we're running out of time.
I think
I need 2 minutes.
I think. Oh,
yeah,
okay,
go ahead.
Important question is that I think America knows the position and geography of Pakistan. Pakistan cannot ignore China. Pakistan has to live with China. China is the one of the largest military and even political power in the world. So Pakistan cannot leave that. Secondly, America, it is in American interest to have their presence in Kabul, in Afghanistan, and in a few other parts of the region, and they cannot maintain that presence without Pakistani support. And same is what you see the negotiation going on in Qatar, Doha, and a few other places. Pakistan is playing a role of facilitation. So Pakistan is important for both. Geographically for China, Pakistan cannot be disassociated with that geography. And yes, regarding America, interest in the region and countering Iranian threat and the issues in Afghanistan, they need Pakistan, Pakistani soil and the support of government of Pakistan. So I think Pakistan will manage the issue accordingly. As in the larger context, even India is managing China on one hand and America on the other hand. So in international relations, countries go for their own national interest. So both Pakistan will manage both countries and will not be part of any proxy war of these both countries in this in its own land, in its own soil.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being crisp and short. I think we're running out of time, and I need just a couple of minutes before I hand back to Aditya Tikku to give him 2 minutes at the end. But I think I want to thank all of you very much for having participated in this discussion. Thank you from your different time zones for coming in. I think we have had a very interesting discussion. And I would say that what my takeaways are as follows. Number one, we're still in the early days of the post-COVID or the COVID world. Most countries are still battling the immediate problem of the COVID virus. The number of deaths are rising in most countries. I would say even China is not over the hump, even though some economic activity has resumed there. Therefore, it is still early days to speak about what are the possibilities in a post-COVID world. Secondly, as far as BRI is concerned, it appears as if the BRI is going to continue, but it may have to be, China would have to cut its coat according to the cloth it has. It may have to downsize BRI a bit for the next few years before economic activity across the globe picks up again. And finally, of course, I think the third big takeaway is that, that many countries in the post-COVID world, especially developing countries, would need development finance and would need assistance in undertaking projects, whether it's infrastructure projects or others. And therefore, Chinese investment would be one of the objectives and one of the ways of making their economies grow again. I think I'll stop there. I would also recommend to GCTC that perhaps we can take up this subject again, maybe 6 months down the line, when what a post-COVID world really is going to look like becomes more clear. But we could change the topic slightly and we could discuss that 6 months down the line. With those words, let me hand back to our coordinator, Aditya Tikku, sitting in Delhi. Aditya, the floor is yours to summarize for the last 2 or 3 minutes of time that we have. And thank you very much for putting this group together and for getting this conversation off the ground. Thank you, Aditya. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Ambassador Bambavale. Well, first of all, I would like to thank all the esteemed speakers who gave their comments and delivered their best talks about the relevance of BRI from their very busy schedule. To start with, I would like to thank General Daya Ratnaike, then my fellow friend from Pakistan, Nasir Shirazi Saab, and General KJ Singh sir, and Dr. Prabir Dey, Captain Bansal, thank you that we had you, and Lucio, Senior from Russia, Professor Swan Singh. In the end, I would request if they want to give last comments, maybe for something for GCTC, so that it will certainly help GCTC grow. Thank you. I will start, if we can start with Lucio, please. Thank you. Lucio. Well, General Ratnaike, you can start it, please.
Hello.
Last
Hi.
comment, please. Yeah.
Can I?
Please.
Yeah, Aditya, thank you so much. And it was a very lovely and nice interaction. and I enjoyed it. And thank you once again. I will not take much time, and looking forward to see you again in a similar or physically to have a seminar, get over this COVID-19, and we got to meet once again in a seminar like this in physical. Thank you so much, and thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, sir. Lucy.
Thank you again, Aditya, for inviting me to join this conversation. If I may, just like to lastly make my insight on the question raised earlier by Ms. Cleo Pascal. So I think the issue about the compensation demand will certainly raise the bar going forward for countries that would be faced by disease unknown to science or mysterious diseases. So I think it would really raise the threshold for sovereign responsibility and accountability on issues on early outbreaks of unknown disease. It might be an unprecedented move. So I think it's also very important for US and other countries maybe to how to package the lawsuits or the charges so as not to be seen as tying down a rival in great power competition. And then on the counter-terror question, I think, of course, as the Belt and Road increases and expands, it will encounter a lot of security issues. So I think China would work with host or participating states in trying to address this. This could be through bilateral means or through regional undertakings like the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So this capacity building efforts would be made through different channels. I think GCTC as a platform for discussing strategic and security issues for the region will play a very, very important role in bringing these key issues to light and probably to guide policymakers going forward. Thank you again, and more power to GCTC.
Thank you. I would request Ambassador Bambawale, who actually helped GCTC grow and gave his time from your busy schedule to moderate. Ambassador Bambawale, sir. I suppose he has left. Can we have General KJ, please? General KJ. Captain Alok Bansal.
I have to say, Aditya, keep up the good job. I think it's a very relevant subject that we discussed. Probably to my mind, a little prematurely, because at this stage, we really don't know the extent of COVID-19 and its impact at this stage. Probably a month later, we would be in a better position to say something, because as of now, even the vaccine is beyond horizon. So once we have some idea, I think a discussion on this subject will be far more relevant. But please keep up the good work. You are doing a wonderful job. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Senior from Russia.
Aditya, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Can you hear me?
Sir, very well, sir.
Yeah, I'm sorry my audio was not working. What I want to say is that BRI will get on back foot. It will get recalibrated. But one place where it will definitely start earlier than other places is CPEC. Because in CPEC, China has already sunk a lot of money, time, and investment. There are about 7,000 to 8,000 workers over there. There is a division size force which has been raised to protect those people. Early harvest projects, now power generation, have already started. So whatever happens, for India, the challenge remains. And only thing we can hope is that China now takes into consideration issues of security, recalibrates this project, and drop some of the fancy projects like livestock farming, like trying to bring manufacturing over there, like trying to have vaccine project even, that is listed over there. So we hope that it is often said by a Pakistani general only that Chinese are Chinese first, businessmen next, and then only they can be Pakistan's friend. So we hope that Pakistan also realizes this and they consider this project as Pakistanis first, for their people next, and then for their friend Chinese. With that, thank you, Aditya. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, General. Now, Professor Swaran Singh.
Thank you, Aditya. I agree with the General KJ Singh. I think the good side of BRI would be China's increasing consciousness and contribution to fight terrorism. They have already asked Pakistan to raise about 1,500 troops to protect their assets and engineers. And we have seen them also with Pakistan holding counter-terrorism exercises. So that's a positive side in case PPEC part of BRI goes ahead. Then we will see China becoming far more conscious of the terrorism problem in the region. I would be slightly less optimistic than Captain Bansal, who said that maybe we will kind of reassess the situation after a month. I am perhaps more with Ambassador Bambawala, who said 6 months down the line, perhaps we will be in position to maybe reassess what is happening in terms of BRI post-COVID-19. So I again look forward. Great, job done. I would say, Aditya, you are really full of energy. You managed to bring in so many people together, and we also wish to thank the chair, Ambassador Bambawala, for having stirred it so nicely. So thank you very much. I was happy to be part of it, and I look forward to continuing this relationship. Thank you.
Senior from Russia, please.
Yeah, thank you so much. I would like to thank all the distinguished participants for this thought-provoking and enriching discussion. And of course, thank you so much, CGTC and Aditya, for bringing us all together. It has been a very interesting discussion, and I do hope that we continue with this initiative and go back to discussing these issues of BRI and broader regional collaboration in several months, because the thing that this crisis has underlined is the need for coordinated action among the regional and regional states and all over the world, and the need to have a broader understanding of security, those dealing not only with military and conventional threats, but also with threats dealing with health and other natural disasters and situations. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Senior. Well, as our chair already said that we should come in very soon, maybe within 5 to 6 months, and maybe GCTC will definitely go for this post-COVID thing once again, maybe after 6 months. We think we do have the best of the people that time too. And once again, I would like to thank all the esteemed speakers who held out time from their busy schedule, and our chair. Thank you once again. And yes, the great audience and our distinguished members from GCTC, once again, thank you. And take care of yourself. Stay safe. Stay healthy. Bye-bye.